You know I love you like a sister, but you're dumber than a box of hammers if you think he's really at the office. The thought had crossed my mind. Hell, it had moved in and started paying rent. But there's a difference between suspecting your husband is cheating and actually doing something about it. The first one just makes you paranoid. The second one changes everything. That night, I sat in my recliner, watching the Cubs lose to the Cardinals while nursing a beer that had gone warm an hour ago. Our house felt bigger when Logan wasn't in it, like his absence somehow expanded the walls. The place was nice enough. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a decent neighborhood where people still waved at each other. We'd bought it 12 years ago when we still talked about having more kids. Casey, our 19-year-old daughter, was away at college. She called every Sunday like clockwork, usually wanting to tell me about some professor who was changing her worldview or some boy who was changing her heart. I missed those calls more than I would ever admit out loud. Around midnight, I heard Logan's car in the driveway. I stayed in my chair, pretending to be asleep, and listened to him fumble with his keys. When he finally made it inside, he smelled like expensive cologne, perfume clinging faintly to his jacket, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something that definitely wasn't stale coffee and copy machine toner from a late night at the office. "How was work?" I asked without opening my eyes. He jumped a little. "Oh, you scared me. It was fine. Long presentation for the Morrison account. I filed that away for later." By the next afternoon, I was standing in the downtown Marriott staring at my husband across a corner booth. He was sharing a bottle of wine with a woman named Erica McCall, holding her hand across the table like it belonged there. He was wearing the blue tie I bought him for our anniversary, and he was smiling at her with a softness I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Then he looked up and saw me. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might collapse right there in front of her. I walked to the table on legs that didn't feel like mine and heard my own voice come out far steadier than my pulse. "Hey, honey," I said. "How's that Morrison account coming along?" In that moment, before he answered, before he lied or confessed or tried to explain, I already knew one thing with absolute certainty. My life had just split in two, and there was no way back to the woman I'd been that morning. My name is Nicole Granger. I'm 42 years old, and until a few months ago, I was the kind of woman people described with words like steady, dependable, practical. I owned an auto repair garage on the west side of town, the kind of place where people came because they knew I'd tell them the truth. If a brake line needed replacing, I told them. If it didn't, I told them that too. I had built a life around that kind of honesty because machines made sense to me in a way people often didn't. You listen closely enough, and a car will tell you exactly what's wrong with it. Marriage, I learned too late, does not. Logan and I met 21 years ago at a neighborhood 4th of July cookout. I still remember the first thing I noticed about him. It wasn't his face, though he was handsome in that easy, open way that made strangers trust him faster than they should. It was his laugh. Big, warm, confident. The kind of laugh that made you turn your head before you even knew why. He was talking to a group of people near the grill, one hand wrapped around a paper plate, the other moving when he spoke, and when someone introduced us, he looked at me like I was the only person in that crowded backyard worth paying attention to. At the time, that feeling was intoxicating. I was 21, working long hours, and trying to prove myself in an industry where men still looked over my shoulder to see if there was a real mechanic nearby. Logan made me feel feminine without making me feel small, seen without being judged. He liked that I knew how to change my own oil and rebuild a transmission. I liked that he didn't seem threatened by my ambition, at least not then. We dated for 3 years before we got married. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just the slow, ordinary kind of love that feels safe enough to build a future on. He proposed with a nervous smile and a ring he spent months saving for, and I said yes before he even got through the whole speech. Back then, I thought that was what certainty felt like. For a long time, maybe it was. We had Casey 2 years after the wedding, and for a while our life settled into something that looked solid from every angle. I handled the garage, the books, the house repairs, most of the practical things that kept daily life running. Logan worked in corporate sales, which meant polished shoes, client lunches, quarterly targets, and an endless stream of stories about office politics I only half cared about. He used to come home and loosen his tie at the kitchen counter while I made dinner, and he'd talk while I chopped onions or stirred sauce, and sometimes Casey would come running in with a school paper or a scraped knee or a question only a 6-year-old could ask with total seriousness. Those are the memories that hurt the most when I think back on them now. Not the fights, not the lies. The ordinary evenings. The ones that looked so harmless while they were happening. Even in the good years, there were little things I ignored. Logan liked attention more than I ever fully admitted to myself. He didn't just enjoy being liked. He needed it. Needed to be noticed when he walked into a room. Needed people to laugh at his jokes, nod at his stories, admire his taste, his clothes, his opinions. At parties, women tended to orbit him. He had that effortless charm that made them lean in when he spoke. I used to take pride in it. I used to think, that's my husband. Now I wonder how many warning signs I dressed up as compliments because I didn't want to look at them too closely. My relationship with his family was always polite, but never easy. His mother, Diane, had the kind of smile that could pass for warmth until you listened carefully. She never said anything openly cruel. She didn't have to. She preferred softer knives, little comments over holiday dinners. Nicole's always been so independent. It must be hard for Logan, with your schedule. You're lucky he understands how demanding you are, the kind of remarks you can't call out without sounding oversensitive, but that leave a bruise all the same. His sister, Melissa, was easier, friendly enough, though loyal to Logan in the reflexive way some families are. If he was wrong, they didn't ask whether he was wrong. They asked what had made him that way. I fit into their world, but I never fully belonged in it. And maybe Logan felt that distance too. Maybe that's part of what happened to us. Or maybe that's just the kind of question women ask themselves after betrayal, when we start pulling apart old years with trembling hands, searching for the exact thread that came loose first. The truth is, nothing exploded all at once. Things faded. The conversations got shorter. His compliments became occasional, then rare. Our schedules stopped overlapping in the easy ways they used to. He started checking his phone more at dinner, started dressing with more care on ordinary weekdays, started coming home with the energy already spent somewhere else. I noticed all of it. I just didn't call it what it was. Because once you name something, it becomes real. And I think some part of me knew that if I let myself say the words out loud, if I admitted my husband was slipping away from me, one polished excuse at a time, then the whole life I had built around him might crack open under my feet. So I kept moving. I ran the garage. I paid attention to Casey. I made coffee in the mornings and folded laundry at night and told myself every marriage goes through dry seasons. Every long relationship gets quiet. Every couple can drift a little without drowning. What I didn't understand then was that drifting only works when both people are still in the same boat. By the time I stood in that hotel bar and saw Logan with Erica McCall, hand in hand, smiling like a man who had already emotionally left home, the betrayal itself was shocking. But the deeper pain came from realizing the truth had been approaching me for a long time, and I had been loving him hard enough to mistake distance for stress, silence for fatigue, and deception for something temporary that would pass if I just kept being patient. The first time something felt off, I told myself I was overthinking. It started small, the kind of small that slips past your guard because it doesn't demand attention. Logan began staying later at work, not every night, just enough to create a pattern that didn't quite feel like one yet. At first, it was end-of-quarter pressure. Then it became client dinners, then unexpected presentations. Each explanation came smoothly, confidently, like he'd rehearsed it just enough to sound natural. And I nodded, every time. "You're working too hard," I told him one evening, watching him loosen his tie at the kitchen counter. He smiled, tired but still charming. "It'll pay off. Big account. Morrison deal could change everything." Morrison. Even then, the name settled somewhere in the back of my mind, not as a warning, just as something unfinished. It wasn't just the hours. It was the way he started dressing. Subtle changes at first, a new watch that looked more expensive than anything he'd worn before, shirts that fit just a little sharper, a cologne I didn't recognize, something heavier, more deliberate, the kind of scent that doesn't linger by accident. One morning, I watched him in the mirror, adjusting his hair longer than usual. "You have a meeting with the president or something?" I asked, half teasing. He met my eyes through the reflection and smiled. "Just trying to look professional." Professional. That word should have been harmless. Instead, it felt like a door quietly closing. There were other things, too. Little fractures in routine that didn't break anything on their own, but together started forming a shape I couldn't ignore forever. He stopped asking about my day. Not completely. Just enough that the question became automatic. Something he said while already looking at his phone. "How was the garage?" "Busy." "Good." That was it. Conversation reduced to placeholders. At night, he would sit beside me on the couch, but not with me. His body was there, but his attention lived somewhere else. His phone lit up more often. Notifications he angled away from me just slightly, as if by instinct. Not dramatic, not obvious, just careful. Careful enough to matter. Once, around 2 a.m, I woke up and found his side of the bed empty. I walked down the hallway, quiet, and saw the faint glow of his phone from the living room. He was sitting there in the dark, shoulders slightly hunched, smiling at something on the screen. "Logan?" He flinched. Actually flinched. "Oh, hey, I couldn't sleep." "Who are you talking to?" "No one, just scrolling." He turned the phone over as he said it. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not shattered. Not yet. But shifted. Because people who have nothing to hide don't react like that. Still, I let it go. I don't know if it was denial or hope. Maybe both. There's a particular kind of fear that comes with suspecting the person you've built your entire adult life with might be slipping away from you. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. Slow. It sits in your chest and asks questions you're not ready to answer. And every time you push it down, it comes back a little stronger. His family didn't help. Diane started making comments again. Not about me directly this time. About Logan. He's been under so much pressure lately, she said over dinner one Sunday. Men need appreciation, Nicole. They carry a lot more than people realize. I looked at Logan, expecting him to say something, anything. He just shrugged. Melissa chimed in with a soft laugh. Yeah, he's always been the one holding everything together. Holding everything together. I remember gripping my fork a little tighter than necessary. Because I knew exactly who handled the bills, who fixed the house when something broke, who made sure Casey's tuition was paid on time, who woke up early and went to bed late to keep our life functioning. But I didn't say anything, because saying it would turn it into a fight. And at that point, I was still trying to preserve something I hadn't yet admitted was already cracking. The suspicions came in waves after that. A receipt in his jacket pocket from a restaurant we had never been to together. A charge on the credit card that didn't match anything he'd mentioned. A text notification that popped up briefly while he was in the shower, just long enough for me to see a name I didn't recognize. Erica. No last name, just Erica. I stood there staring at the phone, my heart doing something strange and uneven in my chest. I didn't open the message. I didn't unlock the screen. I just stood there and let the moment pass. Because I understood something in that instant that terrified me more than anything else. If I looked, if I confirmed it, if I crossed that line from suspicion into proof, then I wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. And pretending, as fragile as it was, still gave me one thing I wasn't ready to lose. Time. Time where my marriage still technically existed. Time where I was still his wife in more than just name. Time before everything changed. But time has a way of running out whether you're ready or not. And eventually, the truth stops waiting for permission. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of replacing brake pads on a Ford Explorer. My hands were covered in grease. My mind focused on something simple, something solvable. Tighten, adjust, check alignment, problems that made sense. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Nicole speaking. There was a pause. Then a young woman's voice, hesitant, nervous. Hi, this is going to sound weird, but I work at the Marriott downtown, in the bar. And I think your husband comes in here sometimes. Everything inside me went still. The wrench slipped slightly in my hand. Why are you calling me? I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. Because he's here right now, she said. And he's not alone. I have a husband too. If it were me, I'd want someone to tell me. For a second, I couldn't speak. The garage noise faded into something distant, like I was underwater. Thank you, I said finally. I hung up, wiped my hands on a rag, and didn't say a word to anyone as I grabbed my keys. The Marriott was 15 minutes away. I made it in 8. I don't remember the drive. I don't remember the traffic lights or the turns or the sound of the engine. I just remember walking through the hotel lobby, my heart beating so hard it felt like it was pushing against my ribs, and thinking, this is it. This is the moment everything becomes real. The bar was dimly lit, soft music playing, glasses clinking, people laughing in small groups. And there they were. Logan sat in a corner booth, leaning forward slightly, his hands stretched across the table. His fingers were laced with hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. Erica McCall. She was beautiful in that polished, deliberate way. Dark hair styled perfectly, a dress that fit like it had been tailored for her, confidence in the way she held herself. She was looking at him like he was the most interesting man she had ever met, and he was looking at her the same way. That was the part that hurt the most. Not just that he was there, Not just that he was cheating, but that look. That soft, attentive expression I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I stood there for a few seconds, maybe longer. Long enough to feel something inside me detach slightly, like my body was preparing itself for impact. Then Logan looked up, and everything changed. The color drained from his face instantly. His hand pulled back from hers like it had been burned. Erica followed his gaze, her expression shifting from curiosity to discomfort in less than a second. I walked toward them. Each step felt strangely controlled, like I was moving through a script I hadn't agreed to, but somehow knew by heart. "Hey, honey," I said. My voice sounded normal, calm, almost gentle. "How's that Morrison account coming along?" Logan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing. Erica cleared her throat. "You must be Nicole. I'm Erica McCall. I work with Logan." She didn't offer her hand. Smart woman. "Funny thing about that Morrison account," I said, my eyes still on Logan. "Seems like it doesn't exist." "Nicole," he finally managed, his voice tight. "I can explain." "I bet you can." I turned slightly, just enough to include her without really looking at her. "The question is, do I want to hear it?" Silence. The kind that presses in from all sides. Around us, the bar kept moving. Conversations, laughter, the soft hum of life continuing like nothing had just shattered in the middle of it. But at that table, everything had stopped. "We should talk," Logan said finally. "Yeah," I replied. "We should." I stepped back. But not here, and not with her. For a second, I thought he might follow me. Say something. Try to fix it right there in that dim corner of a hotel bar. He didn't. I turned and walked away before either of them could speak again. My hands started shaking as soon as I reached the parking lot. Not from anger, not yet. From certainty. That heavy, undeniable certainty that something had ended, whether I was ready for it or not. The drive home was a blur of red lights and empty thoughts. I kept seeing his face. The panic, the guilt. And before that, the way he had looked at her. I sat at the kitchen table when I got home, staring at the note he'd left that morning. "Early meeting. Coffee's made. Love you. Love you." The words felt different now. Not warm. Not familiar. Just hollow. When he walked through the door an hour later, I didn't look up right away. "Nicole," he said quietly, "we need to talk." I let a few seconds pass. Then I nodded. No argument there. He sat across from me at the table where we had eaten thousands of meals, where we had helped Casey with homework, where we had planned vacations, argued about money, laughed over nothing. It all felt like it belonged to someone else now. "It's not what you think," he said. I let out a small, humorless breath. "Really?" "Because what I think is that my husband is having an affair with a woman from his office." I finally looked up at him. "Am I wrong?" Silence. "Am I wrong, Logan?" His eyes dropped to his hands. "It's complicated." "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's really not." I leaned forward slightly. "Either you're sleeping with her, or you're not." Another silence. Then, yes. The word hit harder than anything I had seen at the hotel. Because seeing can still leave room for doubt. Hearing it removes that completely. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." His voice dropped. 3 months. 3 months. A quarter of a year. All those late nights. All those excuses. All those mornings I kissed him goodbye, while he was already planning to betray me before lunch. I swallowed, forcing my next question out. "Do you love her?" This time the silence stretched longer. Long enough to hurt. Yes. And there it was. The end. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a single word that erased 18 years of marriage in less than a second. I leaned back in my chair, my hands resting flat against the table to keep them from shaking. Everything felt strangely quiet, like the world had stepped back and was waiting to see what I would do next. But in that moment, I didn't know. All I knew was that nothing in my life would ever look the same again. The next few days didn't explode the way people imagine betrayal does. There were no screaming matches, no broken plates, no dramatic exits, just silence. Careful, measured, almost polite silence. Logan moved into the guest bedroom that night without either of us needing to say it out loud. He took a small suitcase, some clothes, his toiletries, the essentials. The rest of his life remained scattered throughout the house like a ghost that hadn't quite realized it was gone yet. We passed each other in hallways like strangers trying not to make eye contact. "Morning," he said once, standing by the coffee machine. "Morning," I replied, pouring myself a cup I didn't really want. That was the entire conversation. I kept expecting the anger to come, the kind of anger that burns hot and loud and gives you something to hold on to. But it didn't. What I felt instead was hollow. like someone had reached inside my chest and removed something important without telling me exactly what it was. At night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Every conversation, every small moment I had brushed aside. Every time I chose trust over instinct. Around 3 in the morning, my mind became relentless. What did I miss? When did it start? Was there a moment I could have changed this? Or had it already been decided long before I even realized there was a decision to make? The questions didn't have answers. They just circled. The first real conversation we had after that night came 2 days later. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he still belonged there. "Nicole, we should figure out what happens next." I didn't look up right away. I kept wiping the same spot on the counter over and over until it was already clean. What do you want to happen?" I asked. He shifted his weight. "I don't know. I don't want to make this harder than it has to be." That sentence did something to me. I set the cloth down slowly and turned to face him. "Harder than it has to be?" I repeated. "You're having an affair. You told me you love her, and you're worried about things being convenient?" "That's not what I meant." Then explain it to me, Logan, because I'm trying very hard to understand how this gets any easier." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping into his expression. "I didn't plan for this to happen." I let out a short breath. "That's the part you keep saying, like it's supposed to matter." "It does matter." "No," I said quietly. "It doesn't, because it still happened, and you still chose it." That word, chose, hung between us heavier than anything else, because that's what it was. Not an accident. Not a mistake. A decision. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a second I saw something in his eyes that almost resembled regret. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. I held his gaze. "But you did." Silence settled again. Not sharp this time. Just tired. "I've been thinking," he said after a moment. Maybe we should take some space. Officially." There it was. The word he didn't want to say yet. Separation. "For how long?" I asked. "I don't know. Until we figure things out." I nodded slowly. "You mean until you figure out whether you want to be with her instead of me?" He didn't deny it. That hurt more than if he had argued. "Where will you go?" I asked. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, "Erica has a place downtown. She said I could stay there for a while." Of course she did. Of course everything was already arranged. "Convenient," I said softly. "Nicole." I raised a hand slightly. "No, don't explain it again. I've heard enough explanations." We stood there, facing each other across a space that used to feel small and familiar and now felt impossible to cross. "I'm not going to beg you to stay," I said finally. His expression shifted, like he hadn't expected that. "I'm not going to compete with her. I'm not going to convince you to choose me." I took a breath, steadying myself. "If you don't already know, then there's nothing left for me to prove." He looked down, his jaw tightening. "I'm sorry." That word again. Useless. "I know," I said. And for the first time, I realized I meant it. Not forgiveness. Not acceptance. Just recognition. This was who he was now. Or maybe who he had always been, and I was only just seeing it clearly. Later that night, I sat alone in the living room, the house quiet around me in a way that felt heavier than silence should. My phone rang. Casey. I stared at the screen for a second before answering. "Hey, sweetheart." "Hey, Mom, how are things?" Her voice was bright, familiar, untouched by everything that was unraveling here. "Good," I said automatically. "How's school?" "Brutal. I've got 3 papers due next week and a chemistry exam that's going to decide whether I graduate or just disappear into academic failure forever." I smiled faintly. "You'll be fine. You always are." There was a pause. "Is Dad okay?" she asked. "I talked to him yesterday. He sounded weird." My eyes drifted toward the guest bedroom door. "Why, he's been working a lot," I said carefully. "Yeah, he mentioned something about a big account. Morrison." That name again, sitting there like a quiet lie we were all pretending was still real. I almost told her. The words rose up so fast it surprised me. "Your father is leaving. He's with another woman. Everything you thought was stable isn't anymore." But I couldn't. Not like this. Not while she was stressed and far away and still believing in something that hadn't fully collapsed yet. "He's fine," I said instead. "We're all fine." "Okay, good," she replied, though I could hear the hesitation in her voice. "I was thinking about coming home for a weekend soon, maybe next month." "I'd like that," I said softly. "I'd really like that." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Thinking about how to tell my daughter that her family was breaking apart. Thinking about how to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. Thinking about how, somehow, I had gone from a woman with a stable life, a husband, a home, a future that felt predictable, to someone sitting alone in a quiet house, trying to figure out what version of herself was going to survive this. And for the first time since that night at the hotel, I didn't feel confused. I felt something else, something quieter, something sharper. Not anger, not yet, but something was starting to take shape inside me. And I had a feeling it wasn't going to stay quiet for long. Friday morning brought the first real snow of the season. The kind that settles softly at first, then quietly takes over everything. By the time I finished my coffee, the street outside had turned white. Familiar shapes softened into something colder, cleaner, almost unrecognizable. It felt appropriate. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Logan. Going out with friends tonight. Don't wait up. Friends. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then set the phone down without replying. The lie wasn't even creative anymore. It was routine. I worked a full day at the garage, but I couldn't focus the way I normally did. My hands moved on instinct, tightening bolts, checking alignments, finishing jobs I'd done 100 times before. But my mind kept drifting to the hotel, to his face, to the way he said yes when I asked if he loved her. By the time I closed up for the night, something inside me had shifted again. Not broken, not healed. Just decided. I called Mike. You busy tonight? I asked. Busy is relative, he said. Why? I looked out at the darkening street. Feel like helping me confirm something I already know? There was a pause. Now that, he said slowly, sounds serious. We met near the downtown Marriott just after 7. Mike had borrowed his cousin's old sedan, something forgettable enough to blend into traffic. We parked across the street, the engine idling softly as snow continued to fall in thin, steady lines. This feels like a bad idea, he muttered, adjusting the rearview mirror. It is, I said, but I'm doing it anyway. He glanced at me. You sure you want to see this again? No, but I nodded. 'Cause there's a point where not knowing hurts more than confirmation. At 7:30, Logan's car pulled into the garage entrance. Right on time. 5 minutes later, he walked into the hotel lobby. He wasn't alone for long. Erica was already there. She stepped toward him like this was normal, like this was expected, like this was theirs. He smiled when he saw her. That same smile. My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. Well, Mike said quietly, there's your answer. We watched as they moved toward the restaurant. Through the glass, we could see them being seated at a table for 2. Candles, wine, close conversation. His hand reaching across the table again, like it had the night before, like it belonged there. Do you want to go in? Mike asked. And do what? I said. Make a scene, throw a drink in his face? He shrugged. Wouldn't be the worst reaction. I already did that part, I said quietly. It didn't change anything. So we stayed. 2 hours. 2 hours of watching my husband share a life with someone else in real time. They laughed. They leaned in. They looked like a couple celebrating something. Not hiding. Not ashamed. Just comfortable. Around 10, they stood up. And this time, instead of heading back toward the bar, they walked to the elevators. They didn't come back down. Mike let out a slow breath. Okay, he said. That's enough. I nodded. Because there was nothing left to confirm. Nothing left to question. Nothing left to misunderstand. Take me home, I said. The drive back was quieter than the first time. No racing thoughts. No disbelief. Just clarity. When we pulled up to my house, Mike turned off the engine but didn't say anything right away. You're not okay, he said finally. No, I replied, but I will be. He studied me for a moment. You've got that look. What look? The one that says you're done being the victim. I didn't answer. Because he wasn't wrong. When I walked into the house, it didn't feel like home. Not anymore. It felt like a place I used to belong to. I stood in the living room for a long time, just looking at everything. The furniture, the photos, the small details that used to mean stability, comfort, permanence. Now they just felt temporary, like a stage after the actors have left. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't pick up my phone. I just sat there in the quiet and let everything settle, not the pain. That was still there. But underneath it, something else was growing. Something steady, something controlled, something that didn't need to shout to be real. Around midnight, headlights cut across the front window. Logan. I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was as he parked and got out of the car. A moment later, the front door opened. He stepped inside, stopping when he saw me sitting there in the dim light. Nicole, you're still up. I could say the same thing, I replied. He hesitated. I told you I was out with friends. I held his gaze. Yeah, I said, you did. The silence that followed was heavier this time. Because now, we both knew I wasn't guessing anymore. I've been thinking, he said carefully. I leaned back slightly. So have I. He swallowed. I think It might be best if we separate, officially. There it was. Not a possibility anymore. A decision. For how long? I asked. I don't know, until we figure things out. I nodded slowly. You mean until you figure out if she's worth leaving me for? His jaw tightened. It's not that simple. It is, I said calmly. You're already with her. You're just deciding if it's permanent. He didn't argue. That told me everything. Where will you go? I asked. He looked down briefly. Erica said I can stay with her. Of course she did. Everything lined up too neatly for this to be new. Then go, I said. He blinked. What? If that's what you want, go. I stood up, crossing the room slowly. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to fight you for a place in your life. I paused in front of him. But understand something, Logan. My voice stayed steady. If you walk out that door, you don't get to come back and pretend this didn't happen. Something flickered in his expression. Doubt, fear, regret. But not enough. I never meant for this to happen, he said again. Softer this time. I almost smiled. That doesn't matter anymore. We stood there, inches apart, and for a brief second I saw the man I had married. And then he was gone again, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. When? I asked. This weekend, he said quietly. I'll pack some things. I nodded. What about Casey? We'll tell her together when she comes home for Thanksgiving. That thought hit harder than anything else. She's going to be devastated. I know. Another silence. Longer this time. Final. I should go upstairs, he said. Yeah, I replied. You should. I watched him walk away. Watched him disappear into the part of the house that used to be ours. Then I sat back down in the quiet. And for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't waiting for him to choose me. I wasn't hoping things would fix themselves. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was preparing. For what exactly? I didn't know yet, but I could feel it coming. And whatever it wasn't going to leave me broken. Saturday morning arrived gray and sharp, the kind of cold that settles into your bones before you even realize it's there. I woke up early, not because I wanted to, because sleep had stopped feeling like something I could rely on. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. There was movement upstairs, soft footsteps, the sound of drawers opening and closing, fabric shifting, zippers. Logan was packing. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold in my hands, listening to the life we had built together being folded into boxes, one piece at a time. Each sound felt like a countdown, a finality. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't help. I didn't say anything. Because there are moments where words don't fix anything. They just make the ending louder. Around noon, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. A few seconds later, the doorbell rang. I'll get it, Logan called from upstairs, his voice carrying down like nothing about this was unusual. I stayed exactly where I was. I heard the door open, low voices in the hallway, then footsteps, and then she appeared. Erica McCall, standing in my house. For a second, everything inside me went very still. She looked just as composed as she had at the hotel, polished, controlled, dressed like she belonged anywhere she chose to be. Even here? Hi, she said carefully, lingering near the doorway like she understood she was stepping into something she couldn't fully control. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her, took in every detail. The woman my husband had chosen over me. The woman who now stood in my living room like she was part of this story. Logan came down the stairs behind her, carrying a box. Nicole, he started. I raised a hand slightly. Don't, I said quietly, because I didn't want explanations. Not anymore. Erica shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable. I know this is difficult, she said. I just came to help Logan. To help him leave, I finished for her. She nodded once. At least she didn't pretend otherwise. Logan set the box down, looking between us like he was trying to manage something that had already spun out of his control. This doesn't have to be hostile, he said. I almost laughed. It's not hostile, I replied. It's honest. That word again. Honest. Something our marriage hadn't been for a while. He hesitated, then gestured toward the stairs. I'll just finish packing. He disappeared again, leaving the two of us standing there in a silence that felt heavier than any argument could have. Erica took a slow breath. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said. I looked at her, really looked this time. You keep saying that, I said, both of you. Her expression tightened slightly. It's the truth. No, I replied softly. It's the version of the truth that makes it easier to live with. She didn't answer, because there wasn't a clean response to that. I stood up slowly, setting my coffee cup down. You knew he was married, I said. Not accusing, not emotional, just stating it. Yes. And you stayed anyway. Another pause. Yes. I nodded once. Then you meant for it to happen. That landed. I could see it in her face. Not guilt exactly, but recognition. Logan came back down a few minutes later with another box, tension written clearly across his shoulders. "Everything's almost ready," he said. I stepped aside, giving him space without touching him, without stopping him, without asking him to stay, because that part of me was gone. He moved back and forth between the house and the car for the next half hour, each trip quieter than the last, each step further away from what we had been. I watched from the living room window as he loaded the final box into the trunk. Erica stood beside him, talking softly, her hand brushing his arm in a way that was meant to comfort. He didn't pull away. Of course he didn't. When he came back inside, the house already felt different. Lighter in some places, empty in others. "I think that's everything," he said. I nodded. We stood there facing each other, surrounded by the space that used to hold 18 years of shared life. "This is really what you want?" I asked. His answer came faster than I expected. Yes, a clean answer. No hesitation, no confusion. That hurt more than anything else. "Even after everything?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes. "Especially after everything." That sentence settled deep, because it told me something I hadn't fully allowed myself to accept before. This wasn't just about her. This was about him choosing a different life entirely. A life that didn't include me. "We could have tried," I said. "Counseling, fixing things." He hesitated. "Would it have worked?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But we didn't even try." He looked away. "I shouldn't have to compete for my own husband," I added. That was the closest I came to anger. Not loud, not explosive. Just truth. Erica shifted near the door. "I'll wait in the car," she said quietly. Smart again. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Now it was just us. One last time. "I hope someday you understand why this happened," he said. I held his gaze. "I understand it perfectly," I replied. "You chose something that felt exciting over something that was real." His jaw tightened. It wasn't just that. "It always is," I said gently. Silence stretched between us. Long. Final. "I should go," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "You should." He picked up his last bag and walked toward the door. He paused for a second, like he might say something else. He didn't. The door closed. And just like that, he was gone. I stood there in the quiet, listening to the sound of his car starting, then fading, then disappearing completely. The house settled into a silence so deep it almost felt physical. I walked slowly through the rooms. The bedroom, the closet, the bathroom. Everywhere he used to be, reduced to absence. That's when it hit. Not the anger, not even the betrayal, but the weight of being alone, after 18 years of not being alone. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands resting on my knees, and for the first time since all of this began, I let myself feel it. The grief, the loss, the collapse of something I had believed would last my entire life. No control, no strength, no composure, just pain. And it was deeper than I expected, because it wasn't just losing him. It was losing the version of myself that existed with him. The woman who believed in that marriage. The woman who trusted without hesitation. The woman who thought love, once built, stayed. That woman was gone too, and sitting there, in the quiet, in the empty space he left behind. I realized something that scared me more than anything else. I didn't know who I was without him. Not yet, but I was about to find out. The next morning didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like standing in the aftermath of something that had already burned down. The house was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comforts you, but the kind that reminds you over and over again that something is missing. His shoes weren't by the door. His voice didn't echo from another room. Even the air felt different, like it had lost a familiar rhythm. I made coffee out of habit, took one sip, set it down. Everything tasted flat. I walked through the house slowly, noticing things I hadn't seen clearly before. The empty half of the closet, the bathroom counter stripped down to only my things. The absence wasn't loud anymore. It was settled, permanent, and that's when my phone rang. Unknown number. For a second, I almost ignored it. Then I answered. "Nicole?" The voice was older this time, calm, measured. "This is Janice Morrison. I work with Logan." The name clicked immediately. I remembered it from years of hearing about office gossip, company events, casual mentions over dinner. "Yes," I said carefully. "I remember." I wanted to say, "I'm sorry about everything." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Thank you." There was a pause. Then, "I also wanted you to know not everyone thinks Logan did the right thing." That got my attention. "I never expected they would," I said. A soft exhale on the other end. "No, but that's not why I'm calling." Something in her tone shifted, more deliberate. "Between you and me, Erica McCall is not who you think she is." I straightened slightly. What does that mean? It means, Janice said, this isn't the first time she's done this. The words landed quietly, but heavily. I didn't interrupt. I let her continue. She has a pattern, Janice said. She goes after married men, men who are settled, predictable. She knows exactly how to make them feel like they've been missing something. I closed my eyes for a second. That sounded familiar. Too familiar. How do you know this? I asked. I work in HR, she replied, and I pay attention. There was a pause. Oh, look, I don't usually get involved in things like this, but I've seen too many situations like yours, and I don't think you deserve to be left in the dark about who she really is. I didn't say anything, because part of me didn't want to hear it, but a larger part needed to. Are you interested in knowing more? She asked. I looked around the kitchen, at the life that had just been rearranged without my permission. Yes, I said quietly. I'm listening. We met later that afternoon at a small diner on the south side of town. Janice looked exactly like I remembered. Sharp eyes, composed posture, the kind of woman who notices everything and says very little unless she decides it matters. She didn't waste time. Erica is what I'd call a strategist, she said, stirring her coffee. She doesn't stumble into relationships, she selects them. My stomach tightened slightly. Selects? Married men, Janice clarified. Men who feel underappreciated. Men who think they've been overlooked. She studies them, builds rapport, makes them feel seen. I let out a slow breath. That's exactly what Logan said, I murmured. That she understands him. Janice gave a small, knowing nod. Of course she does. That's the first step. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it gently on the table between us. These are copies of emails, she said. Company system, technically accessible under HR review. I stared at the envelope. Emails between them? And others, she said. Others. That word echoed. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside were printed pages, messages, conversations, patterns. The first few emails looked normal, professional, polite. Then gradually they shifted. Subtle compliments, personal remarks. You have a way of seeing things most people miss. I feel like I can talk to you about things I don't say to anyone else. I haven't felt this understood in a long time. I swallowed. Because I had heard those exact phrases before. From Logan to me. Years ago. I kept reading. The tone deepened. Closer, more intimate. I can't stop thinking about you. I know this is complicated, but some things are worth the risk. My hands tightened slightly around the pages. Then Janice slid another set of documents toward me. These, she said quietly, are the ones that matter. I looked down. Different emails. Same sender, but this time not to Erica, to someone named Tom. I read the first line. The new one's hooked. My chest went cold. She'll leave him soon, another line read. They always do. You just have to give them the right attention. I felt my heartbeat slow in a strange, heavy way. Further down, married ones are the easiest. They're already looking for something they think they lost. I stopped breathing for a second. I couldn't finish the sentence. Janice watched me carefully. It's not love, Nicole, she said gently. It's a pattern. I looked back at the pages, at the words, at the structure, at how methodical it all was. And suddenly, everything made sense. The compliments, the timing, the way Logan had changed, the way he had looked at her. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't unique. It wasn't special. It was designed. I sat back slowly, the papers still in my hands. He thinks this is real, I said. Janice nodded. They all do. A long silence followed. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt clear. For the first time since everything started falling apart, I wasn't questioning myself. I wasn't replaying mistakes. I wasn't wondering what I had done wrong. Because this wasn't about me. This was about him. About her. About choices made in a space where truth didn't matter as much as feeling. I placed the papers back into the envelope carefully. What happens now? I asked. Janice studied me. That depends on what you want. I looked down at my hands, then back up, and something inside me settled into place. Not anger, not revenge, something quieter, stronger. I want the truth to be seen, I said. Janice's lips curved slightly. Then you're already ahead of most people. Because the moment you stop protecting a lie is the moment everything starts to change. And for the first time since Logan walked out that door, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was deciding. The first thing I felt wasn't anger. It was clarity. Cold, steady clarity. I spread the documents across my kitchen table that night. Every email, every message, every carefully constructed lie laid out in front of me like pieces of a machine I could finally understand. Erica had a system. Predictable, calculated, repetitive. And Logan had walked straight into it, not because he was forced, because he wanted to. That part mattered. I wasn't going to rewrite reality to make myself feel better. He had chosen this, chosen her, chosen the illusion over the life we built together. But that didn't mean the truth had to stay hidden. I called Mike. "You sound different," he said, after I explained everything Janice had shown me. "I am," I replied. "How different?" I looked down at the papers again. "Clear." There was a pause. "That's either a really good thing or a really dangerous one. Maybe both." He let out a slow breath. "So what are you thinking?" I didn't answer right away, because once I said it out loud, it would become real. "I'm thinking," I said finally, "that people like Erica only keep doing what they do because no one stops them." Mike was quiet for a moment. "And you want to stop her?" "Yes." "And Logan?" I closed my eyes briefly. He made his choice. He'll live with it. Another pause. "You're not talking about confronting them privately, are you?" "No." That answer came without hesitation. "Then what are you talking about?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "I'm talking about making sure the truth isn't something they can quietly move on from." Mike exhaled slowly. "Nicole, that's not a small step." "I know. You sure you want to go there?" I thought about the hotel, the hand-holding, the lies, the way Logan said yes when I asked if he loved her. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I said quietly. "I'm doing it because I'm done protecting something that was already broken." He didn't respond immediately. Then, "All right," he said. "If we're doing this, we do it smart." Over the next week, everything became focused, controlled. I wasn't the woman sitting in the dark wondering what went wrong anymore. I was the woman gathering facts, organizing truth, understanding the full picture. I documented everything. Dates, messages, patterns. Janice helped more than I expected. Quietly, carefully, making sure everything I had was accurate, verifiable, undeniable. "This only works if it's airtight," she told me one afternoon. "It will be," I replied. And I meant it, because this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about reality. The Morrison and Associates holiday party was scheduled for the first Saturday in December. According to Janice, it was the biggest event of the year. Employees, executives, clients, families, everyone important in one room. The perfect place. Not for a scene. For the truth. The hardest part wasn't the preparation. It was the waiting. Pretending to be okay. Answering neighbors with polite smiles. Working at the garage like nothing had changed. Talking to Casey on the phone and choosing my words carefully, because she still didn't know the full extent of what had happened. That conversation would come, but not yet. Not like this. The night of the party, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I expected, not fixing my hair, not adjusting my dress, just looking at myself, trying to see who I was now. Not Logan's wife. Not the woman who had been betrayed. Something else. Something steadier. "Ready?" Janice asked when she picked me up. I nodded. "Ready." The ballroom was exactly what you'd expect. Lights, music, conversations layered over each other, the soft clink of glasses, the hum of people performing normalcy. And there they were, Logan and Erica, standing near the bar, together, comfortable, like nothing in the world was about to change. For a brief moment, something twisted in my chest. Not longing, not regret, just recognition of what used to be mine and what wasn't anymore. Janice touched my arm lightly. "Last chance to walk away," she said. I shook my head. No, because walking away would mean leaving the truth buried. And I was done doing that. Dinner passed in a blur. Small talk. Polite nods. Watching. Waiting. Then the lights dimmed. The company president stepped up to the stage, beginning the awards portion of the evening. This was it. Janice gave a small signal to the AV technician. The screen flickered. Changed. And then the first slide appeared. The real Erica McCall, a pattern of manipulation. For a second, no one reacted. Then the room went quiet. The next slide appeared. An email. Highlighted. Clear. Married ones are the easiest. A ripple moved through the crowd. Whispers. Confusion. Attention sharpening. I looked toward the bar. Logan had gone still. Erica's face changed. Not confusion. Recognition. The next slide. More messages. More patterns. More truth. The room shifted. People turning, looking, understanding. And then, the final slide, a photo. The hotel, Logan and Erica, together, unmistakable. The silence that followed was complete, heavy, unavoidable. Logan stood up. Erica didn't move. For the first time, she looked unsure. The illusion had broken, publicly, completely. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I didn't need to, because the moment had already happened. The truth had already landed, and there was nothing left to hide. I walked out of that room quietly, not rushing, not looking back, not waiting for reactions. Because this was never about them. It was about me, letting go of something that had already ended. And finally, walking away without carrying the lie with me. The cold air outside the hotel hit my face like a reset. Sharp, clean, real. For a moment, I just stood there on the steps, watching the snow fall in slow, quiet patterns under the streetlights. Behind me, through the glass doors, I could still hear the muffled echo of voices rising, confusion turning into something louder, more chaotic. Consequences. They had started. I didn't feel the rush I thought I would. No triumph, no satisfaction, just stillness. A kind of calm that only comes when something long and heavy finally leaves your hands. My phone buzzed. Casey. I hesitated for half a second before answering. Hey, Mom. Her voice was different this time. Tighter, careful. I saw something online, she said. A video from some party. People are talking about it. Of course they were. Truth doesn't stay quiet in a room full of witnesses. I took a slow breath. Yeah, I said softly. We need to talk. There was a pause. Is it true? She asked. The question every parent dreads. The one that forces you to choose between protecting your child and respecting them enough to tell the truth. Yes, I said. Another silence. Longer this time. Then, okay, just that. No screaming. No crying. Not yet. I'm coming home, she added. You don't have to rush, I said gently. We can... I want to, she interrupted. I need to. I closed my eyes briefly. All right. We ended the call quietly. I knew the hard conversations were still ahead. The explanations. The emotions. The rebuilding. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of them. Because I wasn't hiding anything anymore. I got into my car and drove home slowly. The streets were quiet, most houses glowing softly from within. Families inside, living their lives, unaware of how quickly everything can change. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked the same. But it didn't feel the same. It felt mine, not ours. Mine. I walked inside, set my keys down, and stood in the living room for a moment. No echoes of his voice. No tension in the air. No waiting. Just space. And strangely, peace. My phone buzzed again. Mike. Well, he said as soon as I answered, you didn't just tell the truth. You dropped it like a storm. I let out a small breath. Had to be done. How do you feel? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Lighter, I said finally. Not happy, not healed, but lighter. That's a start. Yeah, I agreed. It is. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. Then I turned off the lights, went upstairs, and lay down in the bed that was now entirely mine. No shifting, no pretending, no second guessing. Just quiet. And for the first time in months, I slept, not because everything was fixed, not because the pain was gone, but because the truth was no longer something I had to carry alone. In the weeks that followed, things unfolded the way they always do when illusions collapse. Logan lost more than he expected. Work became complicated. Relationships shifted. The people who once admired him started asking questions he couldn't easily answer. And Erica, she moved on. Not immediately, but predictably, because patterns don't change just because someone believes they're the exception. I didn't interfere. I didn't watch. I didn't wait for updates. Because that part of my life was over. Casey came home. We talked, cried, sat in long silences that said more than words ever could. And slowly, we began to rebuild something new. Not the same, but real. Stronger in a quieter way. As for me, I went back to the garage. Back to work. Back to the rhythm of things that made sense. Engines. Tools. Problems with clear solutions. And in between all of that, I found something I hadn't realized I had lost. Myself. Not the version of me that existed inside a marriage. Not the woman who held everything together for everyone else. But the one underneath all of that. Steady. Capable. Whole. If there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't destroy you. Silence does. The moment you stop protecting what broke you is the moment you start becoming someone new. And sometimes, that new version of you is exactly who you were meant to be all along.